Good morning. Today I shall give you a brief introduction to the theory of Nobel Prize Robert Nozick on state constitution, justice and the ideal society. His major work on these issues is laid down in his book Anarchy, State and Utopia, which he wrote in reply to John Rawls' work A Theory of Justice in 1974. In the following, we will highlight four major approaches in Nozick theory, along which we shall get understanding about the uniqueness of Nozick's paradigm: natural law theory, procedural constitutionalism, theory of justice, and theory of justification. We will not go into all slides in detail for lack of time, but just mention the most important points. Nozick states, just at the beginning, page 7, that a theory of fundamental general descriptions of morally permissible and impermissible actions combined with reason why some persons in any society would violate these moral constraints makes the state arise. The question that lies behind this expression is, what moves human beings? True to libertarian tradition, Nozick bases his answer on natural law theory in Lockean way, starting with a priori positive rights to life, freedom and property. In opposite to many of his fellow libertarians, he does not consider these rights to be inalienable, an important difference as we will see further on. He has a Kantian viewpoint of the individuals as singular, separate and with inert value, that can never be used as means to an end. On this point he opposes directly John Rawls. The major motivation of individuals is to maximize marginal benefit based on rational choice making. He agrees with John Locke that there are only three righteous ways how property rights can be acquired: by acquisition of unsettled things, exchange, or as a gift. The second question is, why is there something rather than nothing? For Nozick, all comes from the differences between individuals and their attitude to compare and strive for a better status. The state comes to be due to a defect in state of nature, similar to John Locke thinking that without the state some would try to benefit from cheating. Nozick's hypothesis is that as long as the preconditions are right, the outcome of the state will be right as well. He compares this to an invisible hand process of free exchange, where libertarian rights must be respected and inequalities can be justified if the preconditions have been right and the process has not been hindered or manipulated. We will see the process as defined in the sentence down here in detail on the next two slides. By comparison, individuals perceive differences in qualities and quantities of wealth and well-being. This stimulates the desire to enhance those goods and exchange surplus quantities against lacking goods. Goods defined here in a very abstract sense. This process is a circular process. In resume, an invisible hand process leads from the state of nature towards a private protective agency by freely agreed exchange of protection for loyalty, as described in the process before, which in a later process leads to the ultra-minimal state, in order to deter the private protective agency from doing more than just protect, and further, the minimal state, limited to the function of protection and legitimized by side constraints and entitlement theory. The minimal state would offer this protection to all individuals within a certain territory. There is a tendency in the process, according to Nozick, to lead to an extended state, which is never justified since it violates individual rights without the consent of the affected, or at least all affected individuals. We perceive now the third question Nozick theory tries to resolve. What is the meaning of inequalities between individuals? Why John Rawls had rather equality as a moral goal for society in mind. Robert Nozick rejects this teleological theory and believes that justice lies in the right process, in the right history. This he calls his entitlement theory. Further, he divides theories of justice in patterned and unpatterned. Nozick's Utopia is non-patterned, which means any outcome of a just process will be just. While Rawls looked for the best outcome of the least advantaged, Nozick defends property rights as non-negotiable under any conditions. In short, property rights are alienable, but people are always the end. The right process, thus, is defined in rules of acquisition that must be respected: homestead, transfer, and rectification of injustice. This brings us to the fourth question. How sure do we need to be that our beliefs correspond to the actual world? Or more concrete, how can we be sure that something has not been acquired in a just way and therefore claims to be rectificated? Here we find something new in libertarian view. Rights by Nozick are not a priori there, as by John Locke, for example. They are only moral side constraints. According to Nozick, there is a defect in the state of nature. We may have heard about it, the free rider problem. The desire to be protected against those free riders motivates some people to pay for protection and bring themselves under a state-like sovereignty, the private property agency, as seen before. In order to define the morally just price, Nozick uses an explanatory approach. Nozick does not claim to give a proof of the one and single right theory on state constitution, but rather offers a new approach how the problem of state existence can be addressed and what has to be taken in mind when doing so. This leads to his process reliabilism, saying that as long as libertarian rights are respected, the emerging process will lead to the right outcome. His logic is a monadic predicate calculus, or even something we could define as a fictitious theory. Actually, the liability comes from the process of state building, and bindingness emerges out of it by precedence in the practical experience of solutions, very much in line with American pragmatism, Peirce, for example. We will not go further in explaining his explanatory philosophy. However, to understand some critics, I will define Nozick theory as a tracking theory, in the sense of David Deutsch, of counterfactual conditions and a monadic prediction. Leaving aside critics from schools opposing libertarianism, I would like to center on 3 points that lay bare some weakness in the work of Nozick. First, from the theories developed by Deutsch, for example, we can consider Nozick's theory of lacking reliability in logic. Further, following the arguments of Kilcullen, we can conclude that Nozick missed to give an alternative moral baseline to Rawls' best possible state of the worst of person. And last but not least, also we may argue that there is no empirical proof and it may lack some practical use. But I consider this secondary, since it was never the claim of Nozick himself. Now, Nozick could not give a concluding theory about the constitution of a state, but he offered a new approach in libertarian traditions to a procedural explanation in constitutional theories and showed the demands for future theories to be built on it. Many thanks for your attention.